When did the floor fall out beneath America? What triggered the worst economic disaster in modern history? And how did a single market crash spiral into a decade of despair, dust, and broken dreams? Between 1929 and 1939, more than 15 million Americans lost their jobs. Farmers saw crops rot in the fields. Breadlines snaked through city streets. Families starved in silence, while Wall Street counted its losses in billions. This wasn't just an economic downturn. It was an apocalypse of the American dream. But how did we get here? And how, and why, did we recover? Let's start. The 1920s glittered with optimism. Jazz clubs thrived. Skyscrapers sliced the skyline. And on Wall Street, stocks soared on credit and confidence. Americans borrowed to buy stocks, to buy homes, to buy cars, a consumer credit explosion. GDP grew 6% yearly. Unemployment hovered at 3 to 4%. Yet beneath the shine lay dangerous cracks, stark wealth inequality, overproduction on farms and factories, and banks underwriting speculative bubbles. By the late 20s, production exceeded demand. Farmers cut prices, tipping into debt. Automakers overbuilt. Steel, coal, and later automobiles, all producing too much, too fast. When the Federal Reserve cautiously raised interest rates in 1928 to 29, the credit bubble trembled. As millions of ordinary Americans speculatively bought stocks on margin, paying just 10%, their fate grew intertwined with Wall Street's volatility. When that bubble popped, the effects would echo across every main street in America. On October 24, 1929, Black Thursday, the market wobbled. Banks stepped in, buying shares to prop up prices. But optimism shattered on October 29, Black Tuesday. Markets plunged 12%, then collapsed by a staggering 30% over the next week. Investors, big and small, lost fortunes overnight. Margin calls forced sales. Trading ground down to a trickle. Panic erupted. Newsreel imagery of crossed-out ticker boards, frantic brokers, and distraught retail investors flashed across newsreels. Everyone from steel magnates to farmers who'd borrowed to enter the bull market found themselves penniless. Banks that had lent without oversight failed. Nearly 600 U.S. banks collapsed by the end of 1930. Depositors lost life savings. Towns in the Midwest, already teetering from low crop prices, found themselves bleeding. By 1930, unemployment reached 5 million, 15% by 1932. Breadlines snaked through city blocks. Soup kitchens became lifelines. Makeshift settlements, Hoovervilles, sprouted in public parks, their inhabitants sleeping under cardboard roofs, forced to watch as Herbert Hoover blamed the recession on international forces, claiming the economy would right itself. But it didn't. Farmers watched their cattle slaughtered and crops plowed under, stuck between surplus production and falling prices. The Dust Bowl ravaged the Great Plains as relentless drought turned farmland into deserts of grit. A single farmer's quote, "I'm living in a dust storm, why shouldn't I die in one?" epitomized the despair. Across the nation, families fractured. Adult children left home to seek work hundreds of miles away. Suicides rose sharply, people unable to bear the shame of unemployment. The personal toll was enormous. Yet Americans retained resolve. They queued, gathered, prayed, protested, begging for government relief, even as Hoover hesitated between rugged individualism and federal aid. Enter Franklin D. Roosevelt, governor, and distant cousin of the idolized Theodore. Campaigning from the depths of despair, he promised a New Deal for the forgotten man. Roosevelt's pledge was clear: immediate, direct federal action. Bank holidays to halt runs. Civilian Conservation Corps to employ millions. Emergency banking relief. After winning by a landslide in November 1932, FDR held his first fireside chat on March 12, 1933. Speaking calmly, he explained the bank holiday: when you see your bank is safe, tell people to deposit their money. Encouraging deposits was his quiet weapon against panic. Within weeks, deposits flowed back. Banks reopened, one by one. By late spring, confidence flickered. It grew once more, proof that leadership and communication could halt panic. FDR's first New Deal smashed expectations. The Agricultural Adjustment Act paid farmers to reduce crop production, raising prices. The Civilian Conservation Corps planted forests, built parks, and restored hope. Over 2.5 million were employed planting trees, building roads, and telling America it mattered. The Tennessee Valley Authority electrified the South, taming rivers and modernizing lives with hydroelectric dams. The National Recovery Administration set wage and price standards to stabilize industry, until it was ruled unconstitutional in 1935. The Homeowners Loan Corporation bought up and refinanced mortgages, preventing foreclosures. Central to FDR's blueprint was experimentation, hundreds of programs, agencies, and trials. None were perfect. Some programs favored white farmers, others skirted constitutional boundaries. But they did something radical, injected federal energy into every corner of the economy, agriculture, industry, infrastructure, and households. Confidence returned incrementally, not in stock tickers, but in public will. The Great Depression wasn't just economic, it soaked into culture. Photographers like Dorothea Lange captured human grit, migrant mother, her face eternally etched with endurance. Writers like John Steinbeck wrote The Grapes of Wrath, charting a family's desperate Dust Bowl migration. Orson Welles' The War of the Worlds broadcast, 1938, captured collective anxiety when fictional invasion caused real panic. Hollywood produced both escapist musicals, 42nd Street, and socially conscious films, I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, exposing injustice. Folk singers like Woody Guthrie, This Land Was Your Land, lent voice to suffering and resilience. Meanwhile, union protests surged. The 1934 West Coast waterfront strike and auto sit-downs reshaped labor. Americans found in culture both reflection and roadmaps for survival. By 1935, Roosevelt returned with bold promises. The Social Security Act created pensions and unemployment insurance. The Wagner Act empowered labor unions. The Works Progress Administration employed writers, artists, and musicians as well as builders, funding murals and theaters. Millions found purpose, beyond bare survival. But critics arose. Conservatives felt New Deal socialism. Business elites feared Roosevelt was reshaping America beyond repair. In 1935, FDR threatened the Supreme Court, 9 old men, to uphold his reforms. Some saw it as a dangerous concentration of power. Huey Long, Louisiana populist, demanded radical wealth redistribution. Roosevelt responded with pragmatism, navigating between extremist voices and moderate opposition. Despite criticism, public support remained strong. Social Security and WPA painted the federal government as an active safety net, a seismic shift from pre-Depression minimalism to lasting structural change. By 1938, industrial production returned to 1929 levels. Unemployment hovered near 17%, better, but still far from healthy. A Roosevelt recession hit in 1937-38 when spending cuts deepened a slump before recovery resumed. Yet decisive federal spending, the arsenal of democracy, became possible as war loomed abroad. Though America remained officially neutral, New Deal programs laid groundwork for wartime mobilization. Factories, roads, and infrastructure that had once fed WPA workers now produced tractors, and later tanks, planes, ships. The economic engine was rebuilt, and armed, for a world heading inevitably toward war. By September 1939, the political truce between labor and capital held, among unity for national defense. Recovery wasn't a return to 1920s normalcy. It was a transformation, shaping a modern mixed economy with permanent federal programs, labor rights, and social safety nets. The Great Depression reshaped America, in ways we still feel today. It birthed the modern welfare state, social security, federal agencies, and regulatory bodies. It taught caution about economic bubbles. It proved that direct government intervention can reverse a national crisis. It embedded in American culture the idea that government has a responsibility to secure public welfare, and that the economy is a shared ecosystem, not just a private game. But it also serves as warning. Inequality, speculation, drought, debt, when combined, can unravel even richest nations. It reminds us that democracy must adapt, balancing freedom and protection. It warns of complacency in boom times. So what will future generations look back on? Will they see our era as a triumph of resilience, or a missed warning, ignored until it becomes too late?